Hello everyone, tonight is August 14th and we are back with another edition of MLB Pro Happy Hour. Thank you to Brenton for suggesting this and for those that have provided some questions and topics for tonight's show. Here we are a couple weeks past the trade deadline. A lot has happened on the trade deadline and since. Here we are mid-August. Approaching September, approaching the end of the season, playoff push underway. Before we dive into a myriad of topics tonight, let's take a look at the sim that took place here about an hour ago. We begin with what was an interleague victory for the New York Mets, 3-2 win over the Orioles. It's 5 straight wins for the Mets. The Detroit Tigers used a 6-run 8th inning to beat the Chicago White Sox 7-4. The Houston Astros were victorious at home, 9-2 winners against the Colorado Rockies. Madison Bumgarner, a trade deadline acquisition for the Rockies, suffered his first loss for Colorado, going just 3 1/3 innings, 8 hits, 6 earned runs for Bumgarner. In a crucial game in the wild card standings, the Toronto Blue Jays took the second of a 4-game series in Kansas City. 5-1 winners were the Blue Jays. Phil Hughes, another trade deadline acquisition, with the win. Yu Darvish took the loss for the struggling Royals. AL East battle, Brian Mattis, once again, another trade deadline acquisition. They're apparently starting everywhere today. Of the Tampa Bay Rays, 4-1 winners over the Yankees. National League West, Arizona Diamondbacks with an interleague victory over the Texas Rangers. Rookie Andrew Morales with a very strong start for the Diamondbacks, going 7 innings, only 2 hits, no earned runs. Morales moves to 6-7 on the year. Battle of teams in the Central. The American League version, the Minnesota Twins, 5-3 winners at home against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Josh Collmenter, all-star game pitcher, moves to 12-3. Garrett Cole, another hard luck loss, falls to 7-10. Battle of the AL West, Seattle Mariners, Danny Holtzman, winners over the Oakland A's, 4-3. Games that took place tonight in the National League ballparks, we had the Milwaukee Brewers beat up on the Chicago Cubs 7-2. Ryan Braun, his 11th homer, Esteban Hernandez, his 16th for the Brewers. The Atlanta Braves with a win at home against the struggling Miami Marlins, who we're going to talk about more here in a bit. Matt Cain moves to 5-11. Lance McCullers falls to 11-9. St. Louis Cardinals, 7-6 winners at home against the Washington Nationals. The Philadelphia Phillies were 4-3 winners with 4 runs in the 8th inning to defeat the Boston Red Sox. The Cleveland Indians defeated the Cincinnati Reds 5-1. Ian Dixon 8-8. Tyler Skaggs falls to 6-12. David Chester picked up his 26th homer in the year. The San Diego Padres with a 2-1 win over the Los Angeles Angels. Broderick Wilson dominant in Padres victory. Wilson 5-12. Kind of a rough season for Wilson after going 7-9 last year as a rookie with a 2.86 ERA. He's fallen back to earth a little bit this year. And in a fierce rivalry, the Los Angeles Dodgers were 3-1 winners over the San Francisco Giants. National League All-Star starting pitcher Parker Markle moves to 15-3 as he defeated Bryce Bandia, who falls to 11-4. That's what we had going on tonight. As far as where things stand after the games played tonight, let's take a quick look at the standings and our updated Stats Lab playoff predictions. The American League East at the moment, the Baltimore Orioles still maintain the best record in baseball at 79-42. They have a 4-game lead on the Toronto Blue Jays at the moment. Both appear to be locks to the playoffs, with the Orioles having a 99.9% playoff odds, and the Blue Jays are currently at 98.8 playoff probability. The Tampa Bay Rays, 61-58, 17 games back. The New York Yankees are now 54-66, and the Boston Red Sox are 41-80, 38 games out of first place. In the Central, the Minnesota Twins have now built up a 4.5-game lead on the Kansas City Royals. The Twins sit at 72-48. The Royals at 67-52. The Royals, a team that not long ago was leading the Central. Things have fallen apart a little bit there. Pitching has become a problem. The Royals' playoff probability now just sits at just 5%. With the Angels' loss and the Mariners' win, the American League West is currently tied at the top at 75-46. The Angels with a 99.4% playoff probability. The Mariners at 98.5%. Like the Royals, another team that has hit a bit of a skid here last 2 or 3 weeks is the Texas Rangers. The Rangers now find themselves 6 games out of both the West and of the American League wildcards race. The Rangers' playoff probabilities are now under 1%. The Oakland A's 53-67. The Houston Astros 47-73. Over in the National League, the New York Mets have a 2-game lead on the Atlanta Braves at the moment. The Mets with the best record in the National League. The Braves the second best record in the National League. The Mets, well, they've already have a 100% playoff probability. The Braves not far behind them at 99.8%. The Philadelphia Phillies have surged here of late and pushed back up to 500, 59-59. While they're 13.5 games out of the National League East race, they are just 4.5 games out of the wildcard race. The Nationals 58-62, and the Miami Marlins on their losing streak have now fallen to 52-70. Over in the National League Central, the Cincinnati Reds maintain a 2-game lead on the Cardinals, a 2.5-game lead on the Brewers, a 7.5-game lead on the Pirates, and a 15-game lead on the Cubs. As of today, while no team has a playoff probability greater than 50%, the Reds do lead the way at 46.2%. The Cardinals not far behind in the standings, just 2 games back, but with a playoff probability at just 24.9%. The Brewers at 26.7%, and can't quite count out the Pittsburgh Pirates. They still have a 2.2% playoff probability. Over in the National League West, where things continue to tighten up seemingly on a daily basis, the Colorado Rockies and Los Angeles Dodgers tied at the top. The San Diego Padres a half game out of first. San Francisco Giants 2 back. And while the Arizona Diamondbacks sit in last place, they are merely just 6.5 games out of first place. The Rockies, Dodgers, Padres, and Giants all have playoff probabilities greater than 35%. Leading the way would be the Dodgers at 74.6%. That's where things stand in the standings. And while there were a handful of topics you guys wanted to cover tonight, I think we need to begin with what's been going on in Miami. The Miami Marlins are in an all-time MLB Pro streak at the moment, it appears. If we go back just over 2 weeks, it was July 28th, the Miami Marlins were 42-40. They were in 3rd place in the division. They were still in a wild card hunt. Since then, it's been 16 straight losses. Again, their last win Saturday, July 28th, an 8-0 win against the Nationals. Since then, not a lot's gone right. They've been outscored 173-109. Their streak includes 4 one-run losses. The 109 runs scored over that period is the worst in the league. As a team, the Marlins are hitting just .235, 27th best. They have an on-base percentage during this streak of just .291, 28th best in the league. And as a team, they're slugging .353, 28th best in the league. It doesn't matter what's going on the mound if the Marlins continue to have this inability to push runs across the plate. And I think the problem begins at the top of the order. The 1-2 pairing of Francisco Lindor and Norm Rowley, they're not producing at the top of the lineup. As table setters, they're just not getting on base. Over the last 16 games, Rowley and Lindor are a combined 65 of 281. Again, 65 of 281 for a batting average of 231 for the 1-2 spot in the batting order for the Marlins. Whether that means taking them out of the lineup, maybe it means shuffling the lineup, but something needs to be done. And all this talk about Joe Girardi, maybe it isn't Joe Girardi. Marlins hitting coach Bob Scoop, it's his first year at the big league level. He had a 6-year career down at AAA in the Pacific Coast League, splitting time between Tucson and New Orleans. Here's a guy, though, that maybe he isn't built quite for the big stage of a Major League Baseball hitting coach. And with a lineup that you still have the likes of a Miguel Cabrera, who is producing, but he's not being offered any protection with Henry Powell hitting behind him, hitting 205 on the season. Bottom of the order hasn't been much better. The combination of whether it's Denver Axe in the infield or Kenny Kroger. The lineup is a problem. And you look at the top prospects they have coming up, they have guys that I think are part of the future. And we see that. Wallace King's now played 39 games at the big league level. He's hitting 255. And sure, he's struggling. On-base percentage under 300, 26 strikeouts, just 4 walks. But he's a top 10 prospect within the organization. You got to play him the rest of the way. On top of King, maybe it's time to give Mark Harrison, the catcher, some run come September. It'll be interesting to see if he gets a chance this year. Both Stephen Vaught and Kyle Skipworth, I believe, are on revocable waivers here in August. Will the Marlins be able to grab a couple players for one of those catchers and give a youngster in Harrison some playing time? Another widely regarded prospect within the organization, 24-year-old Reijiro Yoshikawa, having a decent year down at New Orleans for the Zephyrs, hitting 241 on-base percentage of 308. He provides some power, decent defender, average to above average speed. Will he get a shot here moving forward? It'll be interesting in Miami. But don't get me wrong. While I truly believe the lineup is the problem, we can't ignore what has gone on the mound here the last 2.5 weeks. For the first, from April until late July, I believe he was an All-Star. Was Michael Roman an All-Star? He was not an All-Star, but the Rule 5, there was the Rule 5 controversy last December, but returned back to the Marlins. Michael Roman was having an outstanding start to the season. 23-year-old. From the start of the season until June 28th, he had a 1.1 ERA in 32 2/3 innings pitched. Since then, he's 2-6 with an ERA 6.2 in 20 games, and just over 24 innings pitched. Opponent average, start of the season to the start of the streak, opponents were hitting just 182 off of Roman. Last 2.5 weeks, they're hitting 263. A bump of 81 points in opponent batting average. Guys are hitting Roman. And again, we talked about 4 one-run losses during the streak. If you have a closer that's all of a sudden not just getting hit, but hit at a high rate compared to where he was before the streak, that's a problem. 23-year-old definite all-star Walker Buehler, start of the season, he was 7-2 with an ERA 2.34 in his first 96 1/3 innings pitched. Since then, 1-5 with an ERA of 5.4 in his last 8 games started. In 41 innings pitched during this losing streak, Buehler has surrendered 45 hits. Opponents are hitting 271 against him. So you have a starter that the Marlins were relying on early in the season, and frankly was producing for them to be an all-star. Things have fallen apart for Buehler here the last couple weeks. Even you look at the acquired John Lamb, who the Marlins acquired back on June 14th here in August. Lamb hasn't pitched outside of his last start the other day against Atlanta. He struggled going 4 2/3 and 5 runs, but his 2 starts before that, both losses for the Marlins. Lamb went 6 innings, surrendered 1 run in a 4-3 loss to the Cardinals on August 6th. August 1st, 7-6 loss at Atlanta. Lamb went 5 innings, only giving up 2 runs. So he's been fine in those starts. It's been the bullpen. But 16 games and counting. It doesn't get any easier. Another game tomorrow against the Braves. A Braves team that is surging of late. They're 8-2 in their last 10. The Marlins, are looking at an off day on Thursday before continuing this road trip with 3 games in Washington against a Nationals team that is definitely more in line for a Marlins team than maybe these teams the Marlins have been playing of late here, with 2 losses to the Braves, 3 with the Mets, 3 against the Cardinals, then 4 against the Phillies, and a few more with the Braves earlier in the month. So, again, 16-game losing streak for the Marlins. It's patience. If we go back before the season and said, what are the Miami Marlins? And while I understand fans were excited with the acquisition of Miguel Cabrera, you bring in Miguel Cabrera, you have high hopes. The showing fans were willing to spend, were willing to build, it was admirable. But the Atlanta Braves and the New York Mets are the cream of the crop in the National League. Year after year, consistent, 2 of the best teams in the league. The Philadelphia Phillies, every single year, one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. And while that hasn't really been the case this year, you still got to contend with them. And the Nationals are always right there around 500. So while the Marlins, I think, had high expectations with the offseason and sitting at 42-40 just a couple weeks ago, I think this was a team that was destined to play 500 ball. So sure, the season falling apart here isn't fun for anyone. But this team needs to continue to preach patience. There's going to be a future in Miami. And maybe it's not 2019. Maybe it's closer to 2020. But they have a GM who appears committed to the rebuild. We know Ryan is passionate. And with focus, the Miami Marlins will be back. They're going to win again. Let's get that out of the way. Whether it's tomorrow, whether it's Friday, Saturday, the streak is a mess. Continue to find ways to break it apart, whether it's going and burning chickens in the locker room or doing whatever they need to do. It's only a matter of time before the Marlins break things out. Let's take a quick look, I guess, at the other side of things. A couple of you guys have asked, who are the teams to beat? Who do we think win divisions? Who do we have our eyes on? I think we'll start by taking a quick look at the team with the best record in baseball. That's still the Baltimore Orioles. An Orioles team that continues to frankly get absolutely no love, and I don't understand it. They're 79-42. That's 37 games above 500. They've had a rough June at 13-14. But man, they still have the second best team ERA in the American League, the best bullpen ERA in the American League. They have the second most hits in the American League. An offense that has really these last couple weeks been reshaped. We saw Prince Fielder shaped out and a attention to some defense added with the promotions of Don Lund and Austin Hedges getting more playing time behind the plate. The injury to Rob Segedin, who comes back, or is at least scheduled to go on a rehab stint later this week, will be a big boost back into the lineup. Rob having 20 homers on the season, an on-base percentage of .322, slugging over .400. You put him back in the lineup with the likes of Satake, who was acquired at the deadline. You still have Tyler Townsend, David Candelas, James Baldwin, American League batting leader Travis Jankowski at the top of the order. And that back of the bullpen, you're still looking at Vizcaino and Gabriel Flores. I mean, I don't know how you can't say they're the best back of the bullpen in baseball. And while the Toronto Blue Jays have been, ever since the GM switch early in the season, they've been on a tear acquiring players. It's going to be interesting to see, though, how they're able to deal with some of these injuries they've been dealt here the last couple of weeks. We saw David Price, season-ending injury to his elbow. Sergio Romo's been on the DL. Javi Guerra recently with a calf strain that's going to put him on the DL. The question in Toronto, to me, it centers around one player, at least offensively. I think on the staff, the recently acquired and winner tonight, Phil Hughes, he's going to be an interesting piece to the rotation with the injury to Price. But it's another acquired player early in the season to me that's the difference maker currently for the Blue Jays and the heart of their success, and that's Don Winston. When Don Winston was brought over to fix the designated hitter first base position for the Blue Jays, I believe the Blue Jays front office was most looking forward to the power that Winston would provide to the heart of the order. You had someone in Don Winston who, at the minor league level, consistently was hitting homers year after year, a presence in the middle of the order. Last year, in limited time with the Indians, he had 12 homers. In limited at-bats earlier in the season for the Indians, this year, he had homers. The concern was, could he put the ball in play enough? Winston was hitting 163 with the Indians in his 21 games earlier in the year. He had 258 last season. The last 2 years for the Columbus Clippers at AAA, the Indians organization, he hit 266 and 254. He was a strikeout machine throughout his minor league career. Yet here he is in Toronto. Something's clicked. In 36 games with the Blue Jays, 141 at-bats, Winston has 14 homers, but more importantly, he's hitting .305. He still swings at everything. He has 41 strikeouts and just 6 walks, so his patience hasn't improved, but something in his swing has been fixed. I think we can safely say that the job Brooke Jacoby, the hitting coach, in his 3rd year for the Blue Jays, what he's done has been marvelous. Nothing short of marvelous. He's long been considered one of the best hitting coaches in baseball, and he's proving that with what he's been able to provide Don Winston. If Winston can keep things up, maybe they can catch the Orioles. I don't think so. It'll be interesting, though. In the Central, unfortunately for the Royals, I think that their pitching staff, while the Royals have attempted to trade, it seems like just about everyone and bring in many options in the back of their bullpen, the likes of Noah Syndergaard, Domingo Tapia, it's not clicking. Gary Sanchez, while he's still an American League MVP candidate, and frankly, he's going to finish first or second depending on if you're a Sanchez or Gary Copeland guy. But August has been a bit rough for Sanchez. He's hitting just .262, only 4 homers here in more than halfway through the month. A drop-off after his 10-homer month a month ago in July. And if his production drops, things just become more difficult as a whole for the Kansas City Royals. So that's something to watch there. Even with the recent acquisitions of the likes of Chris Fletcher and Santiago Mateo, they need first and foremost Gary Sanchez. The American League West. It's going to be a dogfight until the end. The Seattle Mariners have been the team that made attempts to get better during the season. I look back at the acquisition of Manny Machado. Bringing in Machado extended the depth in that lineup tremendously. And not only that, but Machado's produced for Seattle. When he was brought over, there was talk about Machado's power. Machado was slugging a mere .377, a career low in Boston earlier in the year. But here in 33 games played for the Mariners, Machado's slugging percentage has risen to almost 100 points to .466. His 7 homers in his 33 games in Seattle. He had just 6 in his first 85 with Boston earlier in the year. Mark Baker, again healthy. Julian Silva continues to hit. Garrett Cicchini continues to hit. Jason Castro hitting. Ike Davis, bottom of the order now against righties. He's got 18 homers hitting out of the 8th spot. There's production top to bottom. They have this still blended speed. You have Nick Williams, 21 stolen bases. Mark Baker, 32 stolen bases. Bubba Starling, 18 stolen bases. As much as we want to make fun of the Seattle Mariners' past with their bullpen struggles, Robert Paulus has been outstanding at the back of the bullpen. So has Elieser Cardenas, both with ERAs under 2. Lucas Sims has been fabulous out of the bullpen. Antonio Bastardo, outstanding out of the bullpen. Maybe the question there is their rotation for once. There's no questioning what Nathan Eovaldi's going to give them. Danny Hultzen has been up and down a little bit. Dylan Bundy has been fantastic. It's those other two. And it begins, obviously, with Felix Hernandez. Here we are, less than 10 days ago. Hernandez went 3 2/3 innings against Texas, giving up 14 hits and 16 earned runs. There were questions about what was going to be done with Felix. But then, just the other day against Oakland, he rebounds with a 7-inning start, giving up just 2 earned runs and a Mariners win. If Felix can be consistent, I think they're going to be the team to beat in the American League West. You look at the Angels. What have they done? At the trade deadline, they traded away Gene Segura to the San Francisco Giants, but they got 2 prospects. They traded Jordan Walden, who was hurt, for prospects. They did absolutely nothing to get better at the major league level. They had been dealing with the injury to Nomar Mazara, and since coming back, Mazara had a 4-hit game the other day against Oakland, but had an 0-for-7 game in the following day. He's had a pair of 1-for-4 games. They need Mazara to get hidden again. But while, like the Mariners, the top of the rotation is not a question with Ryan Copeland, who's been fantastic here really all season at 15-3 in ERA at 2.75. After that, who knows? Brandon Morrow up and down, hard luck loser tonight. Jordan Lyles is coming off a couple bad starts. Blake Snell, I think there's concerns whether a rookie relief pitcher, really in the minors, is he going to continue to have enough strength in his arm? And Chris Archer coming off of a great start, but wild as all can be. A bullpen that continues to be wild. Kenley Jansen, ever since being moved to a specialist role, has improved, but liable to walk numerous batters at any given moment. The same with the likes of Paul Erickson. The Sierra Roldis Chapman is a question mark every time out there. And Takahashi Ishikawa, the high-priced free agent closer, has struggled. He has not produced at the level the Angels have been accustomed to with Jordan Walden in the last couple of years. That could provide an interesting wild card matchup. I am kind of looking at it. Maybe the Blue Jays traveling to Anaheim to take on the Angels, and in a one-game situation, you'd be looking at Ryan Copeland likely for the Angels against probably Michael Pineda. It would be an interesting matchup. The two of the more fearsome offenses in the American League, and the Blue Jays staff that is as good as they come on the mound. That would be an interesting matchup. But team to beat, I think, is the Orioles, and the team that's not getting enough talk, I think it's the Minnesota Twins. Quietly had been just battling the Royals, and here they are having overtaken them. Gary Copeland continues to be I think, the best player in baseball. Martin Lopez at the top of the order, 60 stolen bases, a nightmare for opposing pitchers. Back end of the bullpen's solid with Koji Uehara. Are they going to get enough on their staff? Kevia Sampson, 9-4 this year, but an ERA at 4.5, career worst for Sampson. Coming off of last year, it was 15-8 with an ERA of 3.62. He's been a bit unlucky this year. Last year, balls in play were just hit at an average of 278 against Sampson. This year at 335. Defensively, things have taken a step back for the Twins, but I just don't think they're getting enough talk or respect here in the middle of August. Over in the National League, beginning in the National League East, it's a tight race. Mets again with a 2-game lead on the Braves, and here we are, just a couple weeks ago. Now let me find the exact date of it. Oh, sorry for this. It was August, July, maybe it was this series in August where the Mets had a chance to kind of put the Braves away. They won the first 2 games of a series 5-3 and then 3-1, but then fell the next 2, losing to the Braves 8-1 and 3-2. So while the Mets began to pull away, the Braves kind of roped them back in a little bit. But again, the Mets, best batting average in the National League, second best on-base percentage, 4th in runs scored, the second fewest runs allowed, a lineup that features potential National League MVP Josh Wilcox. You have a top of the order with guys getting on base in front of Wilcox, Matt Dendecker and Elvis Andrus. Wong, acquired from Texas before the season's producing in the middle of the lineup. Jeffrey Marte still producing. The player to watch with the Mets has to be Joe Mauer. Mauer brought in at the deadline to take over for Travis d'Arnaud, who had been really struggling behind the plate. But Mauer hasn't figured things out quite yet in Detroit, in New York. Mauer had been hitting 284 with the Tigers. He's hitting just 191 with the Mets. His on-base percentage with the Tigers was 376. With the Mets, it's merely 224. That's a big difference. A player in Mauer that back in Detroit in his 317 at-bats had 46 strikeouts and 49 walks. Well, in his first 47 at-bats with the Mets, he has 11 strikeouts and just 2 walks. He appears to be a bit flustered by National League pitchers he hasn't seen before. How long will the Mets stick with Mauer before maybe going back to d'Arnaud? At the same time, a Braves team that here, having taken the first couple against the Marlins, they swept the Brewers. They're feeling good. Trevor Bowerson's coming over 2-0 with a 1.38 ERA. Mark Appel in his last 5 games 2-0 with a .83 ERA. Matt Barnes has been fantastic. Matt Cain has been fantastic since coming over from the White Sox. And they're doing all this without a key component of their lineup. Let's not forget that Pablo Sandoval has been out for 3 weeks. He missed 3 additional weeks earlier in the year to a concussion, his most recent injury being a fractured finger. Sandoval was hitting .314 with an on-base percentage of .401, a WAR above 3 in his 75 games played. You add him back to a lineup. What are they going to do with Jose Rosario? Will Jose Rosario shift over to second base maybe and replace Eric Lee? Or is Eric Lee's defense too valuable for a Braves team and a pitching staff that's relying upon good defense? My gut says Rosario becomes the super utility infielder. Sandoval continues at third base and Eric Lee stays at second base. I think Keon Barnum maybe moves up to the 2 spot, but so you're looking at maybe Hideki Abe leading off with Barnum in the 2-hole, Cabanas in the 3-hole, Pablo hitting 4th, Greg Bird 5th, Moore, Brown, and Lee. It's a lineup that's going to be that much better the second Pablo Sandoval is healthy. And if their pitching staff continues to be as dominant as it is, the Braves have every opportunity to catch and pass the New York Mets. The one concern I would have if I was an Atlanta Braves fan, it comes at the back of the bullpen. Since June 1st, closer Dennis Moore has been up and down. Moore's most recent outing, two most recent outings have been successes going 1 inning without a run. But before that, he had a run where things were not going well. A blown save against the Nationals, 2/3 of an inning, 3 hits, 4 runs, only 1 earned that day. He had a 5-run appearance against the Dodgers that broke open a 0-0 game late July. Blown save, not a blown save, but a rough appearance at the All-Star game. A rough appearance and a loss to the Diamondbacks before the All-Star game. Do the Braves make a move in Moore? Could someone like Anthony Zach take over the closer role and move more into a setup role if he continues to falter at the back end of the bullpen? Because that division is going to be tight. The Mets are, again, the best record in the National League. They're as good as they come. The Braves can't throw games away. So while I think Pablo is going to help, I think the leash on closer Dennis Moore is going to become increasingly tight here in the next month and a half. Checking chat quickly, looking like I have a notification. Let's take a look what you guys are saying. The Marlins are going to win again. Yes, they are, Mitch. That is a 2020. It's a good one. Donnie Baseball has to come back to earth. That's a good one. Anyway, it's too hard for me to catch up there. So I'm going to continue with the National League Central. Here we were, a week ago, and everyone was joking that we were approaching 500 in the Central. And what? Since then, the Reds have taken a step backwards. With their recent series against the Indians, the Reds have now lost 4 games in a row. So they were sitting at 57 and 58, now 57 and 62, a 2-game lead on the surging St. Louis Cardinals, a team that is suddenly getting healthy. Jay Bruce should be back in a couple weeks. Justin Upton, potentially by the end of this week, early next week, could be back. Cedric Rutherford back in the lineup after an extended absence. Christian Yelich continues to hit. Evan Longoria did not end up getting traded. Prince Fielder has done nothing in St. Louis. I think it's safe to say Prince Fielder's done. I struggle to see how he's been traded a couple times, frankly, this year. I don't know what the San Diego Padres were thinking a year ago at the deadline when they acquired Prince for the likes of top catching prospect Ron Winterhalter and several other high-end prospects. I don't know what the Baltimore Orioles were doing earlier in the year, giving Prince Fielder a try for Eric Hosmer. And I don't understand what the St. Louis Cardinals were doing giving Prince Fielder a shot here as well. A contract that runs through 2020 at over $24 million a season. It's going to be tough if Prince continues to not produce in the middle of a lineup. Will he? I mean, I can't imagine him losing his spot in the lineup, but how far could he fall down into the batting order, especially once Jay Bruce and Justin Upton are back healthy? It'll be interesting to see what Prince does. But in high leverage situations on the year, he's hitting just 161. That's not going to cut it for a team that brought him in here at the deadline hoping he was going to produce. For the Cardinals, the Brewers, I think it's safe to say they might be taking a step backwards here at the trade deadline. Unlike the Reds, unlike the Cardinals, the Brewers began to blow things up, frankly. I think you can look no further than the trades of both Madison Bumgarner and Santiago Mateo. They're beginning to look ahead to next year. So while they're still within reach, I think a team that has, frankly, the worst pitching staff in the National League, they're not going to be a team to contend with. So it's going to come down to the Reds and the Cardinals. A Reds team that you look at the injuries they've had. Again, Matthew Spalding, Chris Sale, Augusto Garcia, Albert Suarez. Things have been brutal. Beyond brutal, frankly. And here they are still right there, leading the division. A player that has done nothing for them since coming over from Tampa Bay at the deadline is Erinori Arai. The Reds have to get Arai hitting if they want to hold off the Cardinals. In 12 games here with the Reds, Arai is hitting 178 with an on-base percentage of 278. He's just 2 homers so far. It has been a disappointment in the middle of the order for him. In addition, since returning from an injury, a ruptured foot tendon that cost him the first 4.5 months of the season, Nobu Koyama, the Japanese outfielder of the Reds, he too has struggled early on in his return. Just 4 games, but 1 of 12 so far for the Reds. So the combination of Arai and Koyama in the middle of the order not producing here the last week, it's a problem. And while they still have injuries to overcome, I think the Cardinals, with all that is coming back, they could be tough to beat, especially since they've recently made the move with Houston Street. Houston Street had continued to be costing the Cardinals at the back end of the bullpen dearly. And since taking over, William Martin has done a nice job for the Cardinals. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, as well as Clayton Kershaw, who has an ERA approaching 8 in his last 2 games. But if I had to pick a team today to win the Central, I do think I would go with the Cardinals. Toughest division in baseball, though, to predict and to get any kind of grip on here is the National League West. The Rockies, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, and even the Diamondbacks, they're all right in it. The first 4 all separated by no more than 2 games. The Diamondbacks, at 6.5 games out. Like the Brewers, I struggle a little bit with the Dodgers. While they brought in John Helweg for the bullpen, they got rid of Phil Hughes. I don't know if they're going to have it quite enough, even with the likes of Parker Markle leading the way. Jared Cozart still producing. The Padres have gone through their rough spatch. As we talked about earlier, Broderick Wilson taking a step back this year. Still led offensively by Giancarlo Stanton having a fantastic year. Ryan Nash having a good year. Eric Hosmer producing for the Padres, but do they have enough? The 2 teams to me that I think I would have 1-2 at the moment would be the Rockies and the Giants. As we've talked about on Happy Hour a couple times, like the Reds, the Giants had been dealing with injuries at an alarming rate early in the season. You had the likes of Cameron Maben, who had been struggling with injuries. We had a couple pitchers struggling with injuries over in San Francisco early in the year, but they're finally healthy. And I think offensively, the heart of the order in San Francisco is as good as it is anywhere. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Posey, Prado, Hale, Carlisle, Maben. It's tough. It stacks up with anyone. The Rockies, offensively, they're shining, but it's that acquisition of Madison Bumgarner. Bumgarner with Orlando Garcia, Mike Minor, Craig Cooper. A back end of the bullpen, still with Tyler Clippard having a good year. Heath Bell continues to pitch well for the Rockies. Mark Rzycki continuing to pitch well. Ramon LeBron has had a good year for the Rockies. But just like the Giants, middle of the order in Colorado, aided by Coors Field a little bit. But Will Myers, Jock Peterson, Jen McKinley, Roman Zaragoza, even Alejandro Saline. It's a wicked order. Carlos Correa producing some speed at the bottom of the order. It's going to be a very tight race over the National League West. And in addition to the West, I mean, they're not just fighting for top spot in the division, but second place is going to get a wild card spot. And that means there's going to be 2 good teams in the National League West left out of the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting the rest of the way. All 5 teams in the division with tough schedules the rest of the way. It'll be something to keep an eye on as we play out the rest of the season. One other thing I wanted to take a look at tonight, and if while I pull this guy up, if anyone has any last-minute questions you want discussed, send me a PM. It's easier to read your PMs than it is to stay up and chat as I'm going. So if I've missed anything, feel free to send something over. But back at the trade deadline, there was a team that took a unique approach to the deadline. A team that at the deadline was sitting, let's see, what were they sitting? They were sitting 17 games out of the division race. They were 55-52, well outside of the American League wildcard race. That would, of course, be the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays were, frankly, as active as anyone at the deadline. But their focus wasn't on this year. But by saying that, I also don't mean that they were looking at prospects. They got arguably the best starting pitcher who was going to be moved at the deadline or in free agency this coming offseason, and the best relief pitcher who was going to be available to trade deadline or in the offseason. And that's the combination of Steven Strasburg and Jordan Walden. 2 players that were pending free agents. 2 players the Rays saw as players they could acquire at the deadline with the hopes of extending prior to hitting free agency. They wanted a chance to lock down Steven Strasburg and pair him with the likes of Lucas Giolito, Brett Marshall, the also acquired at the deadline Brian Mattis. You have Zach Potter continuing to be injured. You still have Austin Rice, who's having a down year, but a talented pitcher. You saw them make a move. Steven Strasburg has long been one of the best pitchers in the American League. The combination over the last 3 seasons in Detroit with Josh Johnson helped lead the Tigers deep into the playoffs year after year. Consistently throwing well over 200 innings, consistently over 200 strikeouts with the Tigers. Even as league-wide strikeouts were declining, Strasburg was still near the top of the class in terms of strikeouts. On the open market, what was he going to get? We saw the likes of Miguel Cabrera get $34 million last season. We saw Daniel Schlereth in the bullpen get into a bidding war and I believe make $15 million. J.D. Martinez, Cameron Maybin. We've seen free agents on the open market command a lot of money. Strasburg was probably looking at least $25 million a season, probably more. The Rays were able to extend him for 8 years at $164 million, just over $20 million a year. The 8-year deal is pushing it for a pitcher coming off of a big-time injury, an injury that's going to keep him out for, I believe, 10 months. Now on the wrong side of 30, how will Strasburg rebound from this injury? If he reaches what he was before, this is a steal for the Rays. At the same time, I understand still why the Tigers did it. Rumors were he had no intention of re-signing in Detroit. So if he wasn't going to re-sign in Detroit and you weren't looking at a single prospect in a compensatory way following a qualifying offer, Byron Buxton, still 24 years old, one of the fastest players in baseball, a plus defender. Can he figure out his bat? That'll be an interesting and important question for the Rays. Acquiring a catcher in the deal, Mark Thomas. Following the trade of Joe Mauer, there was a glaring hole behind the backstop for the Tigers. Mark Thomas can sit back there and fill in that role moving forward. Arbitration eligible player, not making a ton of money, a move that made sense. A win-win move, I feel, for both teams. And not just Strasburg, but then you throw in Jordan Walden, who does have a player option. I think unlikely he picks it up for a mere $5 million, I believe. 5 or 6, one or the other. But if Tampa Bay does choose to re-sign him, you pair him with the other closer they acquired earlier in the season from Oakland, Philippe Mont. It would give the Rays a lights-out 1-2 combo at the back end of their bullpen. A tremendous move for a team that is dealing with two of the best teams, not just in the American League, but in baseball, within their own division in Baltimore and Toronto. So that is something to keep an eye on. As was just pointed out to me, Amont has not given up a run in Tampa Bay so far this season. That is indeed correct. 16 games pitched, 16 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 0 runs, 21 strikeouts, 3 walks. That is a whip of .36. An ERA plus of 999. That is pretty good. A deal for a closer in Amont who's locked up for 2 more years at $800,000. There's an agent who hopefully was fired for allowing his closer to sign that kind of deal. Because as we've seen with other recent free agent relief pitchers, whether it be Schlereth, whether it be Runzler, whether it be Heath Bell, on the open market, they get paid. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on in Tampa Bay, what they do with Walden here in the next couple of weeks. So that was tonight's happy hour. Quickly checking if there were any questions here. I'm not seeing anything from you guys. I appreciate those that provided some questions for me tonight. I appreciate those that provided some topics for me tonight. I appreciate those that were requesting this tonight. And I also appreciate that just taking a look that it appears there were lots of you listening tonight. As always, tonight was another edition of MLB Pro Happy Hour. I appreciate those who stuck with me, and we'll be back sooner rather than later. Brenton, do me a favor and remind me and bug me to do this again more often so you can enjoy your whiskey while we sit here and talk about MLB Pro. So thanks again, guys. We'll be back with you soon. Take care.